What is going on, guys? Gaston right here, and into this video we are going to be talking about the Sony A7IV. Finally, we have some new information, not a lot of information, but a little bit more. We're going to be sharing that with you coming right up. Welcome back to the channel, guys. Gaston right here, and before we jump into the A74 news, let me remind you about the Sony A7C giveaway that I have going on right here in the channel. In order to enter, simply subscribe to this channel right now, go enable notifications, and follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Gaston Shutters. I'll be announcing the winner on Christmas. Alrighty, so let's talk about the Sony A74 because this camera has been requested for so long already. You know, there is not a single video that I post that people tell me I'm just waiting for the Sony A7IV. So we covered a video before with some of the rumors of this camera, but apparently Sony Alpha Rumors collected some new intelligence from one of their sources. I know they've been wrong and right, but this seems to be pretty legit, guys. Now, Sony is going to announce another camera in 2020, and unfortunately it's not going to be the Sony A7IV, so let's get this camera announcement out of the way so we can talk about the A7IV. So the camera that they're going to be announcing apparently on November 17 is going to be the FX6. Now, this camera is going to be the little brother of the Sony FX9, which is a cinema camera that offers incredible features, and in my opinion, is going to be a super hot seller for Sony. I'm actually really excited about that camera. But you're here for the Sony A7IV, so let's talk about that. Now, Sony is going to be introducing the Sony A7IV around the second to third quarter of 2021. And now you're saying, man, that's a lot of time to wait. And I have to agree with you, but there is a reason why Sony is going to be doing that. Now, the other rumor that we're hearing is that before we hear from the Sony A7IV, we are going to hear from the Sony A9X or A9SR or A9 III. You know, a camera that we also cover in another video that is actually designed to compete with the Canon EOS R5. You know, Sony is going to want to set the record straight with that camera before they move on to a popular camera like the Sony A7IV. Now, the A9X is going to do, you know, incredible things. It's going to have a high megapixel sensor, rumored to be at around 50 megapixel, and it's going to do 8K up to 30p. If you want to learn more about that camera, click on this link. You know, we made a video before. Now, let's go back to the Sony A7IV. I need to get this camera away before I can talk about the A7IV. Now, this camera, the first thing that we are going to have in the camera is finally the flip-out screen. Now, the flip-out screen is not going to be the greatest quality for what we are hearing right now from some of the sources. This camera is going to have maybe a slightly improved version in quality from the Sony A7 III. It's not going to be anywhere near to the Sony A7 III, but something a little bit better than the Sony A7 III, I think is going to be okay. Also, same situation when it comes to the EVF. We are going to have an EVF that's going to be slightly a little bit better than what we had before, but we're not going to have the almost 10 million dots EVF from the Sony A7 III that at one point that was rumored that the Sony A7 IV was going to have. Not the case. Now let's talk about the specs, and the first specs that I want to talk about is the sensor because this one is a pretty exciting news. Sony is finally departing from the 24 megapixel sensor backside illuminated, and now apparently we're going to have a 30 to 32 megapixel sensor, which happens to be incredible news, guys. I think the 32 megapixel sensor is actually a happy medium for most people, including myself. Now, one of the things that actually concerns me is like, is this going to affect the low light capabilities of this camera? Because the 24 megapixel sensor has great low light capabilities. We have seen it with the Sony A7 III, and the Sony A7C is no exception. Now, 30 megapixel is not too much from the 24, you know, it's only 6 more megapixel, but are we going to see any noticeable difference when it comes to low light performance? In my opinion, I think that Sony has figured out how to give us better low light performance with more megapixel, and this is the reason why we are going to see a higher megapixel sensor in the Sony A7 IV. Now let's talk a little bit about video because one of the most requested featured for the Sony A7 IV has been 4K 60p. People want 4K 60p, and guess what? You're going to get 4K 60p in the Sony A7 IV. And again, you know, not a lot of people need to shoot in 120 frames per second, nor Sony is going to jeopardize the sales of the Sony A7 III. You know, that is going to be reserved for the much more expensive camera, but if you tell me 4K 60p, I'm super happy with that, guys. You know, I can slow that down and get really great results. Now let's talk a little bit about the some of the peripherals and connection and stuff like that we're gonna have in this camera. Sony is going to bring the latest Wi-Fi, the latest Bluetooth. Of course, we're gonna have microphone input, headphone jack, and the whole 9 yards. But the other thing that is actually being rumored to make it in this camera is the brand new menu and touchscreen capabilities. Now the Sony A7C has a flip-out screen, but it doesn't have touchscreen capability. Now this is gonna be huge, guys, because imagine having almost everything that you are wanting, you know, in just one camera at a reduced price than the Sony A7 III, because the price of this camera is rumored that it's going to be $2,500. And remember what I mentioned many months ago when I say that Sony is going to price this camera at $2,499. They're bringing newer technologies, and they seem to actually crank up the prices of all the cameras moving forward. I mean, I'm okay with that, right? So this camera is going to have the brand new menu, guys, and this is going to be very interesting because how is this camera going to compete with the Sony A7 III? Well, the Sony A7 III is a camera that is dedicated for videos, but there are a lot of people that are buying the Sony A7 III because right now they don't have a camera like the Sony A7IV. So probably if I had a Sony A7IV right now, I would have gone for a Sony A7IV before I went, you know, for the Sony A7 III. But once again, you know, we're using it at work in that camera. You know, that's an amazing work. And this is the main reason why Sony is going to try to delay, you know, the process of the Sony A7IV announcement as much as possible, because they're going to want to sell you the Sony A7 III, they're going to want to sell you the Sony A7C, and then finally they're going to give you the Sony A7 IV. So this is going to be a very interesting announcement to wait for, guys. You know, a lot of you guys are excited, and let me know in the comments down below if you're actually holding off from buying any camera right now because you're waiting for the Sony A7 IV. As always, guys, you know, subscribe to this channel for more content like this one, and rest for sure that I'm going to keep you posted with more announcement of the Sony A7 IV. See you in the next video.